Tell us a little bit about Sandhurst, yourself and your team. What sort of strategies do you manage at Sandhurst?
For sure. So Sandhurst has been around actually for about 130 years. It's quite an old trustee business. We've got about just over $7 billion of funds under management and administration, and around about 100,000 customers in total. We do a few things at Sandhurst, and they really are including, principally funds management, superannuation, and actually there's a custody business as well. Sandhurst Trustees acts as a custodian, as well as a few other smaller businesses. Within funds management, we really have a couple of key parts to our business. One is a multi-manager, multi-asset class type business, which is mainly superannuation money at the end of the day. And the other is our income funds asset management business, where we have in total roughly about $3 billion under management in some very old mortgage fund, actually. Started in the 50s, well before me. And then some more modern income products, including the Strategic Income Fund, which I'm sure we'll talk about more. Business, we're really, we're a subsidiary of Bendigo Bank, fully owned, so operate kind of like a department of the bank in one sense. And we've been operating for quite some time. As I said, and we've been operating this suite of funds for over a decade now, both sets. The business sort of geographically is spread across the major head offices of the bank. So we've got some staff in Bendigo, Melbourne, and Adelaide. And a lot of my team is based with me in Adelaide. Myself, I'm Chief Investment Officer. I've run these two sets of funds and the super plan from an investment governance kind of perspective for about the last 12, 13 years. My experience prior to that was more in credit portfolio management and in structured finance. So I built structured finance deals or RMBS type deals. And we managed portfolios and you used to do a lot of work around the prickly end of these investments, or the close to the equity part of the game.
So you know how the sausage is made. Huh?
Yeah, and I ran these products into the GFC. So it was the heyday of securitization back in 2005 when I joined the group, and learn a lot about that, and learn a lot then in the GFC as well.
Moving back to Sandhurst and the Strategic Income Fund, more specifically, the team, I believe, has both a top-down approach and a bottom-up credit research approach. Take us through the top-down approach and how that informs the portfolio's allocations across how much you're willing to allocate to credit risk and duration, and what type of credit risk.
Yeah, certainly. So look, I've got a team, as I said, and I probably should have given this at the introduction. Roger Coates is a portfolio manager who focuses on this for this fund, and he's got a team of analysts, which I think are really, really good guys that get out there and probe things. From a top-down perspective, we think it's really important to be clear on where we see both the value and the I guess directionality, momentum of credit markets, and that helps us set perhaps along with liquidity, and I'll come back to that. Helps us set the broad amount of risk taking we should be doing in our funds, and what does that sort of look like? Well, in the income fund, we do invest a lot in floating rate notes and RMBS, and at the top of the structure, these kinds of assets have good liquidity, and so we can sort of move the fund around to have a little bit longer duration. So, buy 5-year floating rate notes instead of 2-year floating rate notes, or the equivalent on RMBS, and that has a material impact on if we see improving conditions, changes the amount of capital gains return you're going to achieve, and so our process is very cognizant of like the value in different sectors. We spend a lot of time on the relative value of say a credit curve compared to the relative value of a different asset class, or if I can give the example of a bank, major bank credit curve versus a regional bank credit curve, or a particular corporate's credit curve. So we look a lot at the relative value as one input from a top-down perspective. The next one would be the momentum in markets. So I'm a believer that markets have a mean reversion property as well as momentum properties, and there's a lot of evidence to that point. We sort of think that a good way to invest is to combine the strength of both, not ignoring liquidity. And again, I'll add that into the equation, but combine the strength of both to I guess it's to reduce the risk and improve the sort of time frame for payoff of risk taking. The simple way to put it is that we like to own things that are relatively cheap when they are catching up to whatever they're relatively cheap to. We're comfortable to keep owning them if they get to fair value, though we'll start rebalancing when they become relatively expensive, if I can put it that way. We don't just buy things that are relatively cheap with no momentum. So that's a piece there. I won't go into momentum. It's reasonably straightforward in terms of we're looking for evidence of price movement. I think the last part of the puzzle, though, is really important to focus on is liquidity. So we do give some consideration to economics, but frankly, they're pretty slow to change economics, except perhaps in March 2020. But liquidity is something that does sort of change a bit more frequently. So the support that both governments and central banks and as well the private bank system is providing to the flow of capital available to the economy is, I think, really critical and has been a really important driver to the returns in not just credit markets but even equity markets, I think, as well. And so over a number of years now. So we're very focused on those sources of liquidity, where the dynamics are today, and where we expect them to go. And I think that like central banks are really good at communicating what they intend to do. They've become good at this forward guidance kind of stuff, but the politicians perhaps have to play political games, and so they are not quite so good. They're certainly not giving as good a forward guidance on opportunities, but it's about reading some of those things and what is the support coming from those two, and then or the opposite, or with tightening coming from those two, and then the commercial private banks, which really can create a lot of money if the conditions are right and the regulatory framework's right for them. So, yeah.
The podcast is for informational purposes only. It does not constitute financial advice or take into account the particular investment objectives, financial situations, or needs of individual listeners. Listeners should consider whether any opinions or recommendations in this podcast are suitable for their particular circumstances and, if appropriate, Seek professional advice, including tax advice.